Wet floodproofing. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but actually it's a phrase used to describe a collection of improvements you can make to reduce flood damage to your home.
Dry floodproofing keeps water outside your home, keeping walls, floors, and closets dry. Therefore, your furniture, appliances, and other contents stay dry. Wet floodproofing lets water into your home. The interior gets wet, but it is modified so water causes minimal damage. With wet floodproofing, your contents still must be moved prior to the flood, and you still face the ordeal and expense of cleanup after waters recede. Wet floodproofing is often the most practical method of reducing flood damage, since it is not an all-or-nothing system, but a set of improvements. Wet floodproofing is flexible, can be done in stages, and may be the least expensive floodproofing option. Even small, inexpensive modifications or the choice of materials when remodeling can lead to large savings after a flood. If you can't elevate your home or build a reliable flood wall or levee, then wet floodproofing or making your home watertight are your choices. Wet floodproofing is the safer option when the strength of your exterior walls is in doubt. The pressure from only 2 to 3 feet of water can cause weak walls to collapse. Letting water into the structure prevents powerful, unequal water pressures on exterior walls. Wet floodproofing involves 3 basic principles: installing appliances, electrical systems, and other equipment so flood water will not affect them, using flood-resistant materials for parts of the building that will come in contact with flood water, and providing a way for a wall and other building cavities to be drained, cleaned, and dried after a flood. The best times to wet floodproof are during remodeling or when repairing flood damage. Here are some ways you can protect home equipment and utilities. Elevate the air conditioner outside compressor unit. Be sure it's on a strong, stable platform and supported so it won't topple over from wind or flood water. This not only saves the cost of replacing the compressor, but means you'll have a working air conditioner to help dry out your home after the flood. Also, elevate the air handler, the inside part of your air conditioner or furnace, if it is below flood level. Raise your water heater on a sturdy platform or locate it in the attic. If it's placed in the attic, make sure to include a drain pan and line to handle potential leaks, and insulate all the water lines to guard against bursting pipes in a hard freeze. Place the washer and dryer on a platform. The platform should be large enough to stand on, or choose a front-loading washer and dryer. Here again, a working washer and dryer will come in very handy when you're cleaning up after the next flood. Freezers and other valuables can be put on platforms too, to protect them from low levels of flooding. Make sure the platform or shelf is made of strong, flood-resistant material and is securely attached to a structural support that will withstand the flooding. Any wood used should be solid, pressure-treated lumber. Never build a platform with pressed wood products that can disintegrate when wet. Some people prefer to suspend appliances rather than placing them on a raised platform resting on the floor. If kitchen appliances are not elevated, install a separate cooktop and wall oven instead of a freestanding range, and use other built-ins above flood level. Whenever it's time to replace an appliance, think about where and how to protect it from floods. As an alternative to elevation, many flood walls can be built around appliances. This would be most practical in the garage or storage areas. Make sure the flood walls do not interfere with air circulation around the appliances and do not obstruct access to the appliances for maintenance. Another option is to have an elevated shed to house some appliances and provide storage space for furniture during a flood. Check with your building permit office. New structures may require building permits and may fall under special development regulations for flood hazard areas. Another wet floodproofing technique is to raise the electrical wiring and outlets so they are above flood levels. If walls are torn out because of flood damage or during remodeling, this is a good time to relocate the electrical outlets higher in the wall. If you have a propane or other fuel tank, be sure it is securely anchored, so it can't float away in a flood. Homeowners with a household sewage treatment system need to protect the motor and to install a backflow valve to stop floodwater from overloading the system. In addition to protecting utilities and appliances, use flood-resistant materials in your home. Materials have differing abilities to resist flood damage. Flood resistance classifications have been developed for flooring, wall, and ceiling materials, and the adhesives used to install them. These classifications are published by FEMA as part of their technical bulletin series on flood protection. Here are some examples of flood-resistant materials that can be used when restoring your home after a flood or when remodeling for a new look. Replace carpeting, wood, or sheet flooring with clay tile, stone, or brick with waterproof mortar. Be sure any mortar and grout can stand up to water, acids, and alkalis. Solid vinyl flooring can also be used, but not the types with cushioned or paper backings. If vinyl is used, you must specify chemical set adhesives. Most adhesives on the shelf at retail home improvement stores will not hold up to flooding. Look for adhesives rated for outdoor use. Terrazzo is a good flood-proof choice in new construction, and the latest trend, stained or patterned concrete, can create a beautiful flood-resistant floor. Even an existing slab floor can be stained. Walls can also be made more resistant to flood damage. Instead of gypsum wallboard, use a flood-resistant material such as ceramic tile, stone, brick, glass blocks, and decay-resistant wood. Use waterproof backings and adhesives. There are two alternatives to using flood-resistant wall materials. One is to use removable wainscot panels that can either be removed before a flood or easily replaced afterwards. Insulation inside the wall should be flood-resistant if it can't be raised up. Typical wall insulation, such as fiberglass and cellulose, absorb and retain water. Replace these with rigid closed-cell foam insulations, such as extruded polystyrene. The other option is to create a gap to prevent water from wicking up the wall. The gap can be filled with caulk or a gasket and covered with a decorative trim, such as a chair rail. If you have to replace cabinets, consider metal or plastic. If you still want wood, stick with solid woods, not particle board. In wet floodproofing, floodwater should be able to flow into and drain out of walls and other cavities to prevent damage from water pressure. After flooding, there should be a way to drain, clean, and dry these spaces easily to remove silt and contaminants and prevent the growth of harmful fungi and bacteria. Consider removable wide baseboards for shallow flooding or removable wainscoting. If flooding is certain and soon, flooding the inside of the building with fresh water as floodwater rises on the outside can reduce your cleanup. This procedure is most beneficial when floodwaters are heavily contaminated, but be cautious. Flooding your home intentionally poses the risk of misjudging the flood hazard and raising a red flag of insurance fraud if floodwaters do not ultimately rise enough to enter your home. There are several important things to remember about wet floodproofing. Activities that involve work on the electrical system, gas, or air conditioning compressor usually require the services of a licensed contractor. Check with the local permit official to find out about requirements in your community. Raising the electrical system above flood levels will protect it from water damage, but it doesn't make it safe to have service turned on while water is in the building. Kill the power before water enters. Since wet floodproofing does not keep the building dry, cleanup is still very important. Even if you successfully stop sewage backup through your plumbing, there is a good chance that water coming in from outside has some chemical and biological contaminants. Be sure to clean, disinfect, and dry thoroughly to prevent decay and the growth of molds that can be hazardous to your family's health long after the flood is gone and your home is restored.
The great thing about wet floodproofing is it's flexible and doesn't have to be done all at once. Each little thing you do has its own payback. If you can only afford one improvement, just do it and save the rest for later. You'll be glad you did.